Hi everyone, welcome back to the channel. Today we're going to talk about Secret Project, or not even Secret Project, sorry. We're going to talk about Mistborn Secret History. So I've already read and reread this short story multiple times, but this is totally a part of my Cosmere reread in anticipation for Stormlight 5. So today we're going to talk about Secret History in context of what it is. In terms of the fact that it's kind of a point five for like each of the books in Mistborn Era 1. So I kind of just want to talk about it generally. So there might be some Cosmere spoilers here, but there will be very few spoilers in general. And we're just kind of going to talk about it from a higher level. So I'm really interested to kind of talk about where this story fits in and the overall like canon of the Cosmere catalog, essentially. So yeah, with that being said, make sure you hit the like button, subscribe to the channel if you haven't done so already, and of course, check out my Patreon. There's plenty of more content coming soon to the Patreon. Right now, it's just exclusively for early access. So yeah, make sure you check that out, and we're going to be pushing towards some more content here soon, so you should see a lot more interesting stuff pop up on there. So yeah, but with that being said, of course, hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and leave a comment. You can support the channel in the classic ways, of course. So yeah, with that being said, let's begin. All right, so a Secret History, Mistborn Secret History. So I really, really love this short story. It's like one of my favorites. I've mentioned before that Emperor Soul is my absolute favorite of Brandon's like Cosmere short stories, but I think this is probably the best like mid quill. It's really hard to categorize this story. I think this is the best sort of point five of like any point five I've read. I think it's one of the most brilliant like pseudo sequel slash taking place during the events of the story that I've read. So it's really hard to describe this book because I think contextually I would think of it as like a point five, but it's really kind of a point two for each of the books. Like it's Final Empire point two, it's Well of Ascension point two, it's Hero of Ages point two. So it's really like an overall point six of Era 1. I don't know, it's a very convoluted way to describe it. Because the plot takes place in the background and on the side, the outskirts of the plot of the first three books of the Mistborn series of Final Empire, Well of Ascension, and Hero of Ages. So it's a really interesting kind of placement for it. So I really think that it's kind of unique in that also, because typically you'll get a point five that's just kind of a jump off of one book, like how we have Edge Dancer or how we have Dawn Shard. Well, Dawn Shard is kind of a point. Yeah, Dawn Shard is totally a point five, but like Edge Dancer is kind of a point two, not really even a point five. But like these little interesting kind of short story tidbits that Brandon kind of keeps in the Cosmere and he kind of pulls out and give them their own life. Something like Elantris, not what was it called? Not Secret History. Cuz there's Emperor Soul and then there's Hope of Elantris. Yeah. So like it's similar to like Hope of Elantris where he kind of adds greater context to the story that's already been told by way of going back in and filling in details of stuff that we didn't see happening. So that's the entirety of what this story is. And it's also just kind of a pure character study and kind of a character play of Kelsier. So we kind of got a lot of hints of Kelsier, but very specifically within the context of the Final Empire. But in this, we get a proper context of him outside of those circumstances, and we kind of get to see the core of the person who he is. And he is interestingly different than who he is presented as in the Final Empire. So that's probably one of my favorite parts about the story is the fact that we get a far more thoroughly fleshed out version of Kelsier. And this is one of the reasons why he became one of my favorite characters in the Cosmere, because who he is in the Final Empire is very interesting and a lot of fun. But who we find out he truly is and like who he is without the influence of other people around him and stuff is still just as fascinating while also being kind of like it makes you a little wary of him, because Brandon has said before that in pretty much any other circumstance, Kelsier would be a bad guy. So he just so happens to be in the place where his negative attributes or whatever are actually exactly what the world needed. So it's just kind of a change of circumstance. And in this book, we kind of get to see the start of the change of circumstances. It kind of goes right into the beginning of it because the entire reason why he is where he is and in that situation is because he selfishly doesn't want to move on. So he is being stubborn and basically ignoring all the benefits to moving on that he could have. And, just purely for the sake of not wanting to feel like he lost, because to him that still feels like losing, even though he totally died. He doesn't consider what happens at the end of the Final Empire as a true loss because it was all a part of his plan. So the idea to, die a final death, that to him would feel like losing. So I just really like the way in which Brandon plays on the personality that we know, and he kind of introduces us to the greater part of his personality that we hadn't met yet. And I love the fact that this story also like seeds in a lot of things that will happen for Kelsier later. So there's like a lot of little hints and kind of implications and stuff. This might be a little bit of hindsight bias because like I know the things that happen later. So maybe upon a re-listen to it or reread of it, like I'm picking out things that seem like they're pointing to other things that I know. But it really does feel like Brandon was already like laying the groundwork. He was seeding in some of this stuff pretty early. So I choose to believe that that's exactly what he was doing. So for me, the difference between Secret History and something like Emperor Soul is that Emperor Soul is very self-contained. Emperor Soul is it's a short story, and it is its own story. So Secret History is a short story, but it's not its own story. Without the context of the Final Empire, Hero of Ages, and Well of Ascension, this story makes almost no sense. And honestly, without a little bit more greater Cosmere knowledge, it can still be a little obtuse for some people. So I just really, really love those aspects of it because being completely, inside knowledge and, fully understanding everything, like this makes it just that much more enjoyable. And also I love the fact that this feels a little bit like he kind of used this book in such a way where he kind of does a flip side of the world building. A lot of the world building and lore stuff that we learn in the first trilogy of Mistborn, we kind of learned it in kind of a halfway. We never learned anything to any true, depth or degree or any, proper knowledge of it, really. It's just really along the lines of the speculation that the characters make. So it's really interesting that in this one, Brandon kind of uses it in a way to confirm all the things that were being speculated in the other books, and it just confirms various things about the realmatics of the Cosmere. So it's really just kind of a pure world building exploration kind of book while also having a mid-level plot going through it, because overall there's a lot of the story in which Kelsier really doesn't do anything to help the those back dealing with everything, but there's still just so much going on at any given time in terms of Cosmere lore and Cosmere knowledge and just world building. So just as a construct, I really like Secret History because it is just so full with world building and lore and stuff, which is something I absolutely love. And then it's tied into a character that's just very, very enjoyable to read. Kelsier, he's just so much fun. And then it also gives greater depth and understanding to the story behind the story. Like it kind of like a lot of people will say the Final Empire is the best book in the first trilogy, and the Hero of Ages and Well of Ascension are almost a slog because the pace of them are very slow, and a lot of the stuff that's going on in those stories are a lot less interesting than the heist plot line we get in the Final Empire. So for me, this kind of levels up those two books in such a way that it makes me enjoy them pretty much on the same level as Final Empire, because this extra world building and this extra context we get from this story immediately for me, it like retroactively applies to those other two books. So especially anytime I go back and revisit them, when I reread them or listen to the audiobook or anything, the context and the information from Secret History that I've since learned always lays in, and it always like comes to bear. It always applies when I reread those other books. So it's always connected. So I always kind of see the Mistborn Era 1 trilogy specifically as a very complete, holistic kind of 4-part series. And I always kind of read it with that thought in mind. So for me, they're inexorably tied. Like I can't think of Well of Ascension and Hero of Ages without thinking of the stuff that we learn in Secret History. So it might be like an effect. Like I don't know whatever opinion any people have on that. Like is it a disservice to my opinion of those two books as individuals because I so heavily tie in another book's context to it? I don't know if that's, not a great reviewer thing to do. I don't know. But for me, it very much happens that way, very organically. Anytime I revisit, like I said, anytime I revisit Era 1, Secret History is constantly that knowledge, that extra information, that world building and lore is always in the basis of my understanding. So it causes Well of Ascension and Hero of Ages to be so much more enjoyable. I think they work so well as like such a cohesive package that quite literally, like, they like almost none of them can exist without the others. Even though I have said Final Empire, if you remove some of the lore seeding and a little of those hints and stuff, it could work totally well as its own. And I do still stand by that. But I think pretty much the entire series works so well as a cohesive whole that with Secret History, like if Secret History didn't exist, then the entire series would be less tied together, in my opinion. But with the knowledge and context of Secret History, it ties all three books together in such a way that I don't think they can ever be separated. So it's all just like one huge story, including what's happening on the other side and stuff. So I just kind of leave it there. I'm like, my entire enjoyment of Secret History is, I mean, apart from the fact that Secret History is in and of itself really fun, really cool, and a lot of interesting world building, but it is so completely and inexorably tied to the original trilogy. It's tied to Final Empire, Well of Ascension, and Hero of Ages completely, forever, and totally tied to it. So I guess if I was to recommend Mistborn, the Era one, I would definitely include Secret History because I think it works really well. And I think it seriously works as like a point two to Fall of the Final Empire, a point two to Well of Ascension, and part two to, point two to Hero of Ages. So therefore, I guess I will have to call Mistborn Secret History a 0.6, which still seems a little overly convoluted in, you know, my attempt to explain it in context like that. But I think that kind of works. Let me know in the comments down below if you agree with me. Does Mistborn Secret History count as like a 0.6 because it's a little tidbit, little mild sequel slash sidequel? Not quite a sequel, but a side story to each one of those stories. So let me know how you would categorize that in the comments down below. And as always, please make sure you check out the Patreon. Go ahead and hit that up if you're interested. But if you can't do that, then please support the channel by leaving a comment and a like on the video. And, you know, get that engagement going up in that algorithm and all that good stuff. Yeah, and of course, let me know what you think about this. Or how do you see Secret History in relation to the Era 1 of Mistborn? Like, are they inexorably tied for you? Let me know about that in the comments down below. So as always, I will talk to y'all next time. Peace.